guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am back with the last battle, chapter 5 and 6, chapter 5 and 6 of the last battle. So let's get to it. Chapter 5, How Help Came to the King. But his misery did not last long. Almost at once there came a bump, and then a second bump, and two children were standing before him. The wood in front of him had been quite empty a second before, and he knew they had not come from behind his tree, for he would have heard them. They had in fact simply appeared from nowhere. He saw at glance that they were wearing the same queer, dingy sort of clothes as the people in his dream, and he saw at a second glance that they were the youngest boy and girl out of that party of 7. Gosh, said the boy, that took one's breath away. I thought, hurry up and get him untied, said the girl. We can talk afterwards. Then she added, turning to Tyrion, I'm sorry, we've been so long. We came the moment we could. While she was speaking, the boy had produced a knife from his pocket and was quickly cutting the king's bonds. Too quickly, in fact, for the king was so stiff and numb that when the last cord was cut, he fell forward on his hands and knees. He couldn't get up again till he had brought some life back into his legs by a good rubbing. I say, said the girl, it was you, wasn't it, who appeared to us that night when we were all at supper nearly a week ago? A week, Fairmere, said Tyrion. My dream led me into your worlds scarce 10 minutes since. It's the unusual muddle about time's pull, said the boy. I remember now, said Tyrion. That too comes all in old tales. The times of you strange land is different from ours. But if we speak of time, 'tis time to be gone from here, for my enemies are close at hand. Will you come with me? Of course, said the girl. It's you we've come to help. Tyrion got to his feet and led them rapidly downhill, southward, and away from the stable. He knew well where he meant to go, but his first aim was to get to rocky places where they would leave no trail, and his second to cross some water so that they would leave no scent. This took them about an hour scrambling and waiting, and while that was going on, nobody had any breath to talk. But even so, Tyrion kept on stealing glances at his companions. The wonder of walking beside the creatures from another world made him feel a little dizzy, but it also made all the old stories seem far more real than they had ever seen before. Anything might happen now. Now, said Tyrion as they came to the head of a little valley which ran down before them among young birch trees. We are out of danger of those villains for a space and may walk more easily. The sun had risen, dewdrops were twinkling on every branch, and birds were singing. What about some grub? I mean for you, sir. We too have all had our breakfast, said the boy. Tyrion wondered very much what he meant by grub, but when the boy opened a bulgy satchel which he was carrying and pulled out a rather greasy and squashy packet, he understood. He was ravenously hungry, though he hadn't thought about it till that moment. There were 2 hard-boiled eggs sandwiches and 2 cheese sandwiches, and 2 with some kind of paste in them. If he hadn't been so hungry, he wouldn't have thought much of the paste, for that is a sort of food nobody eats in Narnia. By the time he had eaten all 6 sandwiches, they had They had come to the bottom of the valley, and they found a mossy cliff with a little fountain bubbling out of it. All three stopped and drank and splashed their hot faces. And now, said the girl as she tossed her wet hair back from her forehead, aren't you going to tell us who you are and why you were tied up, and what is it all about? With a good will, damsel, said Tyrion, but we must keep on march. So while they went on walking, he told them who he was and all the things that had happened to him. And now he said at the end, I am going to a certain tower, one of three that were built in my grandsire time to guard Lantern, waste against certain perilous outlaws who dwelled there in his day. By Aslan's goodwill, I was not robbed of my keys. In that tower we shall find stores of weapons and mail and some victuals also, though no better than dry biscuits. There also we can lie safe while we make our plans. And now, prithee, tell me who you are and all your stories. I'm Eustace Scrub, and this is Ch.5, said the boy, and we were here once before, ages and ages ago, more than a year ago by our time, and there was a chap called Prince Rillian, and they were keeping his chap underground, and Puddleglum put his foot in. Gah, cried Tyrion. Are you then that Eustace and that Jill who rescued King Rillian from his long enchantment? Yes, that's us, said Jill. So he's King Rillian now, is he? Oh, of course he would be. I forgot. Nay, said Tyrion. I'm the seventh in descent from him. He has been dead over 200 years. Jill made a face. She said, that's a horrid part about coming back to Narnia. But Eustace went on. Well, now you know who we are, sire, he said, and it was like this. The professor and Aunt Polly had got all us friends of Narnia together. I know not these names, Eustace, said Tyrion. They're the two who came into Narnia at the very beginning, the day all animals learned to talk. By the lion's mane, cried Tyrion, those two, the Lord Diggory and the Lady Polly, from the dawn of the world, and still alive in your place. They wonder, and the glory of it. But tell me, she isn't really our aunt, you know, said Eustace. She's Miss Plummer, but we call her Aunt Polly. Well, those two got us all together, partly just for fun, so that we could all have a good job about Narnia, for of course there was no one else we can ever talk to about anything like that. But partly because the professor had been feeling that we were somehow wanted over here. Well, then you came in like a ghost, or goodness knows what, and nearly frightened the lives out of us, and vanished without saying a word. After that, we knew for certain there was something up. The next question was how to get here. You can't go just by wanting to. So we talked and talked, and at last the professor said the only way will be by magic rings. It was by those rings that he and Aunt Polly got here long ago, when they were only kids, years before we younger ones were born. But the rings had all been buried in the garden of a house in London. That's our big town, sire. And the house had been all sold. So then the problem was how to get them. You'll never guess what we did in that end. Peter and Edmund That's the High King, Peter, and one who spoke to you went up to London to get into the garden from the back early in the morning before people were up. They were dressed like workmen, so that if anyone did see them, it would look as if they'd come to do something about the drains. I wish I'd been with them. It must have been a glorious fun, and they must have succeeded, for the next day Peter sent us a wire, that a sort of message sire. I'll explain about it some other time, to say he got the rings. And the day after that was the day Jill and I had to go back to school. We're the only two who are still at school, and we're at the same one. So Peter and Edmund were to meet us at that place on the way down to school, and had handed over the rings. It had to be us two who were to go to Narnia, you see, because the older ones couldn't come back. So we got into the train. That's a kind of thing people travel in our world. A lot of wagons chained together. The professor and Aunt Polly and Lucy came with us. We wanted to keep together as long as we could. Well, there we were in the train, and we were just getting to the station where the others were to meet us, and I was looking out of the window to see if I could see them, when suddenly there came a most frightful jerk and a noise, and there we were in Narnia, and there was your Majesty tied up to the tree. So you never used the rings, said Tyrion. No, said Eustace, never even saw them. Aslan did it all for us in his own way without any rings. But the High King, Peter, has them, said Tyrion. Yes, said Jill, but we don't think he can use them. When the two other Pevensies, King Edmund and Queen Lucy, were last here, Aslan said they would never come to Narnia again, and he said something of the same sort to the High King, only longer. You may be sure he'll come like a shot if he's allowed. Gosh, said Eustace, it's getting hot in the sun. Are we nearly there, sire? Look, said Tyrion, and pointed. Not many yards away, great battlements rose above the treetops, and after a minute more walking, they came out in an open grassy space. A stream ran across it, and the far side of the stream stood a squat, square tower with a very few and narrow windows, and one heavy-looking door in the wall that faced them. Tyrion looked sharply this way and that to make sure that no enemies were in sight. Then he walked up to the tower and stood still for a moment, finishing up his bunch of keys, which he wore inside his hunting dress, and on a narrow silver chain that went round his neck. It was a nice bunch of keys that he brought out, for two were golden and many were richly ornamented. You could see at once that they were keys made from opening solo and secret rooms in palaces, or chests or caskets of sweet-smelling wood that contained royal treasures. But the key which he now put into the lock of the door was big and plain, and more rudely made. The lock was stiff. For a moment, Tyrion began to be afraid that he would not be able to turn it. But at last he did, and the door swung open with a sullen creak. Welcome, friends, said Tyrion. I fear this is the best palace that the King of Narnia can now offer to his guests. Tyrion was pleased to see that the two strangers had been well brought up. They both said not to mention it, and that they were sure it would be very nice. As a matter of fact, it was not particularly nice. It was rather dark and smelled very damp. There was only one room in it, and this room went right up to the stone roof, wooden staircase, and said Jill. Not yet, comrade, said Tyrion. He was determined that they should not be caught unarmed and began searching the lockers, thankfully remembering that he had always been careful to have these garrison towers inspected once a year and to make sure that they were stocked with all things needful. The bows, the strings were there in their covering of oiled silk, and the swords and spears were greased against rust, and the armor was kept bright in its wrappings. But there was something even better. Look you, said Tyrion, as he drew out a long mail shirt of a curious pattern and flashed it before the children's eyes. That's funny looking mail, sire, said Eustace. Ah, lad, said Tyrion, no Narnian dwarf smithed tis mail of color mean outlandish gear. I have ever kept a few suits of it in readiness, for I never knew when I or my friends might have reason to walk unseen in the Tisrock land. And look on this stone bottle. In this there is a juice which, when we have rubbed it on our hands and faces, will make us brown as color means. Oh, hurry, said Jill. Disguise. I love disguises. Tyrion showed them how to pour out a little of the juice into the palms of their hands and then rub it well over their faces and necks, right down to the shoulders, and then on their hands right up to the elbow. He said the same himself. After this has hardened on us, he said, we may wash the water. We may wash in water, and it will not change. Nothing but oil and ashes will make us white Narnians again. And now, sweet Jill, let us go to see how this mail shirt becomes you. 'Tis something too long, yet not so much as I feared. Doubtless it belonged to a page in the train of one of their Tarkins. After the mail shirts, they put on color means helmets, which are little round ones, fighting tight to the head and having a spike on top. Then Tyrion took long rolls of some white stuff out of the locker and bound them over the helmets till they became turbans. But the little steel spike still stuck up in the middle. He and Eustace took curved, color-mean swords and little round shields. There was no sword light enough for Jill, but he gave her a long, straight hunting knife, which might do for a sword at a pinch. Past any skill with a bow, maiden, said Tyrion. Nothing worth talking of, said Jill, blushing. Scrub's not bad. Don't you believe her, sire, said Eustace. We've both been practicing archery ever since we got back from Narnia last time, and she's about as good as me now. Not that either of us is much. Then Tyrion gave Jill a bow and quiver full of arrows. The next business was to light a fire, for inside the tower it still felt more like a cave than like anything indoors, and set one shivering. But they got warm gathering wood. The sun was now at its highest, and once the blaze was roaring up the chimney, the place began to look cheerful. Dinner was, however, a dull meal, for the best they could do was to pound up some of the hard biscuits, which they found in a locker, and poured into boiling water with salt, and so as to make a kind of porridge. And of course there was nothing to drink but water. I wish we'd brought a packet of tea, said Jill. Or a tin of cocoa, said Eustace. A firkin or so of good wine in each of these towers would not have been amiss, said Tyrion. Okay, that's the end of chapter 5. Now we're going to do chapter 6. A as they would have to be up most of the night, and he knew that at their age they couldn't do without sleep. Also, he had tired them out. First, he had given Jill some practice in archery and found that, though not up to Narnian standards, she was really not too bad. Indeed, she had succeeded in shooting a rabbit. Not a talking rabbit, of course. There are lots of the ordinary kind about in the Western Narnia, and it was already skinned, cleaned, and hanging up. He had found that both of the children knew all about this chilly and smelly job. They had learned that the king of a kind of thing, on their great journey through giant land in the days of Prince Rilian. Then he had tried to teach Eustace how to use his sword and shield. Eustace had learned quite a lot about sword fighting on his earlier adventures, but he had been all with a straight Narnian sword. He had never handled a curved Colormine scimitar, and that made it hard, for many of the strokes are quite different, and some of the habits he had learned with the long sword had now to be unlearned again. But Tyrion found that he had a good eye and was very quick on his feet. He was surprised at the strength of both the children. In fact, they both seemed to be already much stronger and bigger and more grown up than they had been when he first met them a few hours before. It is one of the effects which Narnia air often has on visitors from our world. All three of them agreed that the very first thing they must do was to go back to the stable, kill, and try to rescue Jewel the unicorn. After that, if they succeeded, they would try to get away eastward to meet the little army which Runwit the centaur would be bringing from Cair Paravel. All experienced warrior and huntsmen like Tyrion can always wake up at the time he wants. So he gave himself till 9 o'clock that night, and then put all worries out of his head and fell asleep at once. He seemed only a moment later when he woke up, but he knew by the light and the very feel of things that he had timed his sleep exactly. He got up, put on his helmet and turban. He had slept in his mail shirt, and then shook the other two till they woke up. They looked, to tell the truth, very gray and dismal as they climbed out of their bunks, and there was a good deal of yawning. Now, said Tyrion, we go due north. From here, by good fortune, 'tis the starry night, and it will be much shorter than our journey this morning, for then we went roundabout, but now we shall go straight. If we are challenged, then do you know to hold your peace, and I will do my best to talk like a cursed, cruel, proud lord of Colormine. If I draw my sword, then thou, Eustace, must do likewise, and let Jill leap behind us and stand with an arrow on the string. But if I cry home, then fly for the tower, both of you, and let none try to fight on, not even one stroke, after I have given the retreat. Such false valor has spoiled many notable plans in the wars now. Friends, in the name of Aslan, let us go forward. Out they went into the cold night. All the great northern stars were burning above the treetops. The northern star of that world is called the Spearhead. It is brighter than our pole star. For a time they could go straight forward toward the Spearhead, but presently they came to a dense thicket, so that they had to go out of their course to get round it. And after that, for they were still overshadowed by branches, it was hard to pick up their bearings. It was Jill other stars even when the spearhead was hidden. As soon as Tyrion saw that she was the best pathfinder of the three of them, he put her in front, and then he was astonished to find how silently and almost invisibly she glided on before them. By the mane, he whispered to Eustace, "This girl is a wondrous woodmaid. If she had dryad blood in her, she could scarce do it better. She's so small. That's what helps," whispered Eustace. But Jill from in front said, "Shh, less noise." All round them the wood was very quiet indeed. It was far too quiet. And on an ordinary Narnia night there ought to have been noises. An occasional cheery good night from a hedgehog, the cry of an owl overhead, perhaps a flute in the distance to tell the fawns dancing, or some throbbing, hammering noise from a dwarf underground. All that was silenced. Gloom and fear reigned over Narnia. After a time, they began to go steeply uphill, and the trees grew further apart. Tyrion could dimly make out the well-known hilltop and the stable. Jill was now going with more and more caution. She kept on making signs to the others with her hands to do the same. Then she stopped dead still, and Tyrion saw her gradually sink down into the grass and disappear without a sound. A moment later she rose again, put her mouth close to Tyrion's ear, and said in the lowest possible whisper, "Get down, thee better." She said for see, not because she had a lisp, but because she knew the hissing letter S is the part of a whisper most likely to be overheard. Tyrion at once lay down almost as silently as Jill, but not quite, for he was heavier and older, and once they were down, he saw how from that position you could see the edge of the hill sharp against the the sky. Two black shapes rose against it. One was at the stable, and the other, a few feet from front of it, was a Colombian sentry. He was keeping very ill watch, not walking or even standing, but sitting with his spear over his shoulder and his chin on his chest. "Well done," said Tyrion to Jill. She had shown him exactly what he needed to know. They got up, and Tyrion now took the lead. Very slowly, hardly daring to breathe, they made their way up to the little clump of trees, which was not more than 40 feet away from the sentinel. "Wait here till I come again," he whispered to the other two. "If I miscarry, fly." Then he sauntered out boldly in full view of the enemy. Then the man started when he saw him, and just going to jump to his feet. He was afraid Tyrion might be one of his own officers, and that he would get into trouble for sitting down. But before he could get up, Tyrion had dropped on one knee beside him, saying, "Art thou a warrior of the Tisrock? May he live forever. It cheers my heart to meet thee among all these beasts and devils of Narnians. Give me thy hand, friend." Before he well knew what was happening, the Colombian sentry found his right hand seized in a mighty grip. Next instant, someone was kneeling on his legs, and a dagger was pressed against his neck. "One noise, and thou art dead," said Tyrion in his ear. "Tell me where the unicorn is, and thou shalt live." Behind the stable, oh my master," stammered the unfortunate man. "Good, rise up and lead me to him." As the man got up, the point Hush, he said. No, do not neigh. Yes, Jewel, it is I. How they have tied thee, hobbled by all four legs, and tied with a bridle to a ring in the stable wall, came Jewel's voice. Stand here, sentry, with your back to the wall. So now, Jewel, set the point of your horn against the Colombian's breast. With a good will, sire, said Jewel. If he moves, drive him into the tower. Then in the few seconds, Tyrion cut the ropes. With the remains of them, he bound the sentry hand and foot. Finally, he made him open his mouth, stuffed it in full of grass, and tied him up from scalp to chin, so that he could make no noise. Lowered the man into a sitting position and set him against the wall. I have done thee some discourtesy, soldier, said Tyrion, but such was my need. If we meet again, I may happen to do thee a better turn. Now, Jewel, let us go softly. He put his left arm round the beast's neck and bent and kissed its nose, and both had great joy. They went back as quietly as possible to the place where he had left the children. It was darker in there under the trees. He nearly ran into Eustace before he saw him. All's well, whispered Tyrion. A good night's work. Now for home. They turned and had gone a few paces when Eustace said, Where are you, Paul? There was no answer. Is Jill on the other side of you, sire? He asked. What? Said Tyrion. Is she not on the other side of you? It was a terrible moment. They dared not shout, but they whispered her name in the loudest whisper they could manage. There was no reply. Did she go from you while I was away? Asked Tyrion. I didn't see or hear her go, said Eustace, but she could have gone without my knowing. She can be as quiet as a cat. You've seen for yourself. At the moment, a far-off drumbeat was heard. Jewel moved his ears forward. Dwarves, he said, and treacherous dwarves' enemies, as likely as not, muttered Tyrion. And here comes something of hoofs much nearer, said Jewel. The two humans and the unicorn stood dead still. There were now so many different things to worry about that they didn't know what to do. The noise of hoofs came steadily nearer, and then quite close to them, a voice whispered, Hello, are you all there? Thank heaven it was Jill. Where the devil have you been to? Said Eustace in a furious whisper, for he had been very frightened. In the stable, gasped Jill, but it was the sort of gasp you give when you're struggling with suppressed laughter. Oh, growled Eustace. You think it funny, do you? Well, all I can say is, have you got Jewel, sire? Asked Jill. Yes, here he is. What is that beast with you? That's him, said Jill. But let's be off home before anyone wakes up. And again there came a little explosion of laughter. The others obeyed, and once, for they had already lingered long enough in that dangerous place, and the dwarf drums seemed to have come a little nearer. It was only after they had been walking southward for several minutes that Eustace said, Got him. What do you mean? The false Aslan, said Jill. What? Said Tyrion. Where have you been? What have you done? Well, sire, said Jill, as soon as I saw that you got the sentry out of the way, I thought, hadn't I better have a look inside the stable and see what really is there. So I crawled along. It was as easy as anything to draw the bolt. Of course, it was pitch black inside and smelled like any other stable. Then I struck a light, and would you believe it, there was nothing at all there but this old donkey with a bundle skin tied on his back. So I drew my knife and told him he'd have to come along with me. As a matter of fact, I needn't have threatened him with the knife at all. He was very fed up with the stable and quite ready to come. Weren't you, puzzled dear? Grace Scott, said Eustace. Well, I'm jiggered. I was jolly angry with you a moment ago, and I still think it was mean of you to sneak off without the rest of us. But I must admit, what I mean to say is, well, it was a perfectly gorgeous thing to do. If she was a boy, she'd have to be knighted, wouldn't she, sire? If she was a boy, said Tyrion, she'd be whipped for disobeying orders. And in the dark, no one could see whether he said this with a frown or a smile. Next minute, there was a sound of rasping metal. What are you doing, sire? Asked Joel sharply, drawing my sword to smite off the head of this accursed ass, said Tyrion in a terrible voice. Stand clear, girl. Oh, don't, please don't, said Jill. Really, you mustn't. It wasn't his fault. It was all the ape. He didn't know any better, and he's very sorry. And then he's a nice donkey. His name's Puzzle, and I've got my arms around his neck. Jill, said Tyrion, you are the bravest and most wood-wise of all my subjects, but also the most malapert and disobedient. Well, let the ass live. What have you to say for yourself, ass? Me, sire, came the donkey's voice. I'm sure I'm very sorry if I've done wrong. The ape said Aslan wanted me to dress up like that, and I thought he'd know. I'm not clever like him. I only did what I was told. It wasn't any fun for me living in that stable. I don't even know what's been going on outside. He's never let me out except for a minute or two at night. Some say some days they forgot to give me any water too. Sire, said Jewel, those dwarves are coming nearer and nearer. Do we want to meet them? Tyrion thought for a moment and then suddenly gave a great laugh out loud. Then he spoke, not this time in a whisper. By the lion, he said, I am growing slow-witted. Meet them. Certainly we will meet them. We will meet anyone now. We have this ass to show them. Let them see the thing that they have feared and bowed to. We can show them the truth of the ape's vile plot. His secret's out. The tides turn. Tomorrow we shall hang the ape on the highest tree in Narnia. No more whispering and skulking and disguise. Where are these honest dwarves? We have good news for them. When you have been whispering for hours, the mere sound of anyone talking out loud has a wonderfully stirring effect. The whole party began talking and laughing. Even Puzzle lifted up his head and gave a grand and a thing that the ape hadn't allowed him to do for days. Then they set off in the direction of the drumming. It grew steadily louder, and soon they could see torchlight as well. They came out of one of those rough roads we should